let's dive into Apollo client. And first of all, I want to say this talk is not about Vue plus GraphQL. Why not? Because I believe this set of topics was covered really nicely many times, and two best talks I can recommend on this topic in particular is Sarah Vieira, which is GraphQL plus Apollo plus Vue is magic, or Guillaume Cho, who was speaking about Vue Apollo, because he's an author of this plugin. So if you're seeking for Vue plus GraphQL, please check this stuff out. Instead, we're going to speak about Apollo client. And when you think about the client for the API, something like Axios, right? You think, okay, this is just to fetch data and like help me handling promises, right? In fact, no, because Apollo client is much more powerful than just fetching data from the GraphQL API. It also handles all the operations for caching this data, storing them, and it's capable of handling your local state in the application, just like Vuex. So Apollo client is a combination of both. You can think about it like Axios plus Vuex if you had a REST API. So let me just reintroduce myself after Anna did. My name is Natalia, and I'm Vue.js core team member. I care mostly about Vue documentation. Right now, I'm very busy writing Vue 3 docs, which should be published really soon. I'm also a Google developer expert in web technologies. And since today, I'm a staff front-end engineer at GitLab. And let's start with a very basic thing with the Axios part of Apollo client. So first of all, we want to fetch data. And how would we have this in the Vue application if we had Vuex and Axios? First, we're dispatching an action. We trigger an API call. If everything is fine, we commit a mutation that it's successful, we are saving the data. If it's not successful, we're committing an error mutation, saving an error. And only after this set of operation, our local state is changed. Well, seems fine enough, right? It's like a bit of boilerplate, but it's fine, still a bit annoying. So how does it happen with an Apollo client? In fact, you're just querying the data, you have a success or error, and then state changed. And this nice green frame shows us that this process is automatic. It happens within Apollo client. You don't need to handle this. And yes, loading state is handled automatically as well. Sounds too nice to be true, right? So let's take a look. How would it work with the code? And yeah, first of all, I have an application which is a bit toxic, like do some live coding first. It won't show you anything. So let's go to the component and try to make our first query. And we will be fetching characters of Rick and Morty from Rick and Morty GraphQL API. So this is how GraphQL query looks like. And yes, this talk is not about GraphQL, but I just want to let you know that you form the response with a request. So when you are requesting this data from the GraphQL API, they will be shaped the same way. So you will have a JSON with all these properties. And here we have a Vue component, which is just trying to iterate through the characters array and to render them on the page. But unfortunately, no characters so far. So let's fetch one. And as second talk today is a bit about composition API, I went ahead and I will be writing the code with Vue 3 syntax. So if you're familiar with Vue Apollo, if you know how it works, please don't be intimidated because I will use syntax of the future Vue Apollo version 4. And no, this is not an exclusive syntax. As you can see, I'm using Apollo composable because in the next version, Vue Apollo will have our familiar option syntax like we're using right now, and also these nice hooks-like methods. And why I'm doing this, first of all, It's new and nice, and I want you to be familiar with this. But also, if you don't have any kind of view background, it's more similar to React hooks that Apollo client uses in React. So this will be more universal. Okay, let's start with fetching our characters from the API. And we want to have some kind of a result, and I'll say like character result. We're giving it an alias because we can have multiple queries, so it's better to give it a proper name, and we won't have a loading state. And to call a query, I will use query method from Apollo Composable, and I will pass our characters query right here. So first of all, let's make a console log of what do we have. Yeah, console log driven development is a really nice thing, using this every single time. And also let's return loading state from the query, as well as some placeholder for characters array. So it would be empty. Let's go to our page. As you can see, this nice text disappeared. Let's refresh. You can see we have a loading for a really short moment of time, and we have some ref implementation in the console. So this is a reactive object. It's called ref that has literally one property, value, and this property is tracked by view component. And here we have a characters object that contains results array that contains lots of characters. This is why we are not using this char result directly. Instead, we just want to extract the result somehow and save it to characters. And for this, we have a second magic hook. It's called use result. And here we want to extract our characters from char result, where the default value should be null. And we want to return data characters results. And obviously, we need to replace this placeholder with actual characters. Yay! Now we have some characters fetched from the API. And yes, it's that simple. I just fetched them. You can say like, yeah, it's what Access does, right? But where are they stored? Do they have any kind of local storage for this? In fact, yes. Everything we just fetched from the API is automatically stored to the Apollo cache. As you can see, we have a whole list of characters with all these properties we defined in the query. And yes, we can retrieve them from the cache and change them, but this will be the next step. So let's go back to our slides and do something more fancy. Because this was basic fetching, but what about a local state as local state? What about something you're not fetching from the API to store in the Apollo cache? And yes, local state in the application is Apollo cache. In fact, every single piece of data you're using in this application is Apollo cache. This is single source of truth in your application, just like Redux or Vuex as a state manager. So if we were about to fetch our favorite characters from the API, our query would look like this. Just very similar to characters query we just performed. And if you want to fetch this data right from the cache, the difference is very slight. You just add in a small client directive right here. And this tells our Apollo client, hey, don't try to go to the API. You can just strictly fetch data from our local Apollo cache. And of course, to fetch something, you need first to have an initial data. Similarly with Vuex, you have an initial state, and here you need to create an initial state as well. And to do so, we need to write some data to cache. We're doing it with write data method. It's a bit outdated. If you're looking forward for Apollo Client version 3, it will be replaced with write fragment and write query, but so far it works. So I'm still fine with this. And if we need to change this data in our Apollo cache, like we would do with VX action or mutation, we will have GraphQL mutation, add to favorites, and again, it's client mutation. And after this, obviously, we need to tell our client what to do on this mutation. Because if you have a mutation that goes to the GraphQL API on the server side, you have a resolver that takes the mutation and performs all the requested operations with a database or whatever you have on the backend. Here, we need to read the cache, update the data, and write back to the cache. Okay, let's try to do this in our application. And first of all, before we start in fetching favorite characters, we need to write them to cache. So I will do exactly the same I was showing on the slides. I want to write data, where data will be favorite characters, just not query, and this is going to be an empty array. Let's quickly check if it worked. Again, we go to Apollo Cache and you can see there is a favorite characters. You can ignore the type JSON for now. In fact, it's just an empty array. What if I want to add some initial character just to check how it works? Again, in the browser, cache. Yes, now you can see we have an array of characters. It's typed, it has a type of character, and there is alien rig. Now we can go to our component, and we can fetch not only characters from the API, but also favorite characters from our local cache. I will skip the whole result logic here, and I will go strictly to fav result to use it in favorites. So we have some kind of result again, and we have an alias of, let's say, fav result. Yeah, live coding. When you live code, you type so badly. It's like I have 5 mistakes per word, and this is completely normal. And we want to use a favorite characters query for this. And yes, let's finally get rid of this placeholder. And instead, we will check it with character. And here, we will form a check. So first of all, you need to remember that fav result, just like char result, is a ref, and viewRef is an object with a value property. So we need to check if fav result value favorite characters, because that's what we added in the cache. We need to check if some of them have an ID equal to the character ID we passed to this function. If you wonder where it's used, let's just check it here. Just move this. So we can see we're calling this as a method from the view template. We are passing a character, and we're checking if we have any favorites. And let's go to the browser, close this. And yes, as you can see, this bluish background means yes, is in favor. I didn't fail, is in favor, it works. And right now we just have Alien Rig as our first favorite Rick and Morty character. One of my favorites, by the way. Now let's try to add something to favorites. And yes, we will fail miserably, because right now, property or method add to favorites is not existing in this component. First, we need to add one. Let's check our add to favorites mutation. It's exactly I had on slides. And this is a client mutation that takes a character and will need to return the whole object with all the properties characters have. So let's now define a method. In fact, we will just return mutate from use mutation hook. And again, I will give it an alias because there will be two different mutations. Let's name it add to favorites. And it should use mutation add to favorites mutation. Quite long, but really nice. And let's take a look how add to favorites is used in the template. When we call it, we pass an object of variables. And here we're passing a character, one of the characters we already rendered with before. So when we click on the button add to favorites, we just call the mutations directly, because now add to favorites is an alias for mutate, for add to favorites mutation. And here is a tricky moment. When you use view composition API, you should never forget to return all the properties and methods in the return from the setup. I do this every single time. So please don't be like me, just return everything single method you're using. Okay, let's clear out the console and try one more time. Is it any better now? At least we don't have a console error. Already fine, but nothing is changed right now. Again, let's go to Apollo DevTools and check. If mutation is called, if something has happened, yeah. As you can see, we are calling the mutation and we have everything we need to make this mutation successful. But why it's not added to favorites array then? Because as I told you, we need to write a resolver. Here we just call in the mutation, but we need to explain to our Apollo client, hey, there is add to favorites mutations. Please do some changes to the local cache. Here is an empty object for resolvers, and we are going to write the first one. We will be writing a resolver for mutation. In particular, this will be add to favorites one. And this resolver takes three different arguments. First is parent context. We don't care about this for now. Second is variables we pass to the mutation, and here we pass a character object. And the last one is context of this particular mutation, and we only need the cache. This will be an Apollo cache we are referring. So first step, we need to read our query from the cache, because as you probably noticed, yeah, I know, it's really nice. As you probably noticed, everything we are storing here are queries, and you're reading data from the cache by queries. So first of all, we want to read data, and this would be cache read query, and query is favorite characters query. As a second step, we need to add a new character to this favorite characters array in data. So we'll have data favorite characters push character. And after this, we need to write our query back with this new data. So this will be write query. Again, we will have favorite characters query here, and we pass data. One small warning for those who are waiting for Apollo Client 3 again. Here I'm mutating data, and this is not really good because since Apollo Client 2.6, Apollo team is encouraging us to use immutable updates. And in Apollo Client 3, this will be a required way of changing data. But again, I'm using my freedom for now, like mutate while you can mutate. And let's take a look if it works now in the application? Yes, it does. Right now, we are able to add characters to favorites, and it's reflected also on favorites tab. Remove from favorites doesn't work. So let's very quickly add one more mutation. And this time, this will be removed from favorites. I will just use completely the same template I used for add to favorites. So it's mutate. I want to remove from favorites, and I will be using a mutation. Remove from favorites mutation. Let's return it here. And let's very quickly write one more resolver. In fact, not write, it will be just very brief copy paste. Remove from favorites. And let's check the parameter here. Because it's different, we're not passing a character, we only passing an ID. And as you can see, this mutation is a bit simpler. It doesn't return anything, it just performs a removal operation, and that's it. So we are passing an ID here. We are reading the query again, but instead of pushing a new character, we just need to filter this favorites array. So we have character here, and character ID shouldn't be equal to ID we passed. So we exclude our passed character from the favorite characters array. And again, we are writing query back. Quick check. Oh no, I don't have favorite characters now. So this is how we work with a local cache. And now some nice tricks that we use at GitLab as well, because we are migrating from old, very old REST API, and sometimes we have frontend migrating faster than backend, and we want to use Apollo client already, but still with a REST API. You can use, in fact, you can use Apollo client with REST API without GraphQL API as well. And you just need to add some magic to your resolver. Here, we just turn characters to be a client query, so we are not reaching out to GraphQL API. And when we want to fetch characters, we write a resolver. And in this resolver, we just fetching characters from the REST API, and then we are saving them in a proper way. And I will show you what proper way means. Oops, this was a bit spoiler. So first of all, I have a link to the REST API here, and I want to change my characters to be a client query. Right now in the browser, I shouldn't have any characters. See, it's like do some live coding first. Because right now I'm fetching characters from the cache, and I don't have any characters here, and I don't have a resolver as well. So my client has no idea where should it get these characters. And here we will write a small resolver to do the trick. So we want to fetch characters. We don't pass any parameters here. Instead, we will form an access call. So I will use access get character. Every single time I was trying to rehearse this live coding, I was failing to see characters and everything falling down, because for some reason they have characters in the GraphQL API, but they have character on the REST API, even though I'm fetching characters. Again, console log driven development. What do we have in the response? So we have an object, and the structure is not even slightly different. It's completely different from the GraphQL API. So we will need to do some work to shape it properly to match our schema. So it has a data that has results, and every single result has lots of different properties. And we don't need all of them, but just some. So let's do our shaping here. So I want to return an object, And here is the first trick. GraphQL has strongly typed response. This means every single object you want to have in the GraphQL response should have a type name. Otherwise, Apollo client won't understand what you're going to store in the cache. So I will start with type name. And here we have a type name of characters. And also we need to have a result here because you probably remember that we're fetching data, characters, results here. We need to follow the same structure in our response here. So results, we want to have our res data results returned from the REST API, and we want to map it here. We have a character and we want to return an object again. Don't forget about type name because this was for characters and this is type name for the single character. Like that. So here we will have a name which is character name, image, which is character image. So what do we have there as well? ID, I guess, which is character ID. And location. And if you think this is going to be character location, it's boring. No, location is an object. And this means it requires a type name as well. It will be a location. And it will have a name, which is characters, location, name. So now it looks like we have a proper structure here. See, we have our characters back, but if we go to Network tab and check where are they fetched from, it's character, and this is not a GraphQL API. This is Rick and Morty REST API. But does it make any difference on Apollo cache? No, we have completely the same structure because we did it on the resolver. And if you wonder if all the logic with favorite works, yes, it does. You still can have favorite characters and everything works completely as it should. And it's really nice for migration because then when you have the GraphQL API finally, you will just remove this client part and the resolver and you're good to go. And the last fancy part, sometimes you don't have even a REST API. Sometimes you just need to build a feature and you're building this in parallel with the backend. And it's always very tricky because you're working like not in sync. But how could we do this easily with a GraphQL API? Again, all magic happens in the resolver. I've been using mock data in our favorite characters, and as you can see, I already created a small set of just characters with all the type names. And I just want to use this set in my resolvers here. So instead of all the access, get whatever I need here, I will just return mock. As you can see, the set is changed. And again, everything is working here. I have all the set I provided in my Apollo cache, and I can build the nice, it's not nice, it's Bootstrap, a nice UX. So again, when backend is ready, I will just simply remove this resolver and this client directive, and I'm good to go. GitHub and Apollo is love. And thank you one more time for Avocado Labs for giving me a chance to give this talk here.